morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Dan Herda. I'm the Director of Communications for United Way. We are so thrilled about today's webinar. We continue to be inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King, and what we're actually doing is celebrating his birthday throughout January and through February with a lot of different events and activities. We recently had an event with Reggie Jackson, and if you didn't have a chance to see that, you can go to our website, unitedwaygmwc.org, and click on a link and watch that. It was very inspiring and very informational. In a moment, you're going to hear from Deanna and Justin with another great webinar for us. We want you to know that you can participate in today's webinar. Deanna and Justin will tell you a little bit more, but there's simply add your question or comment in the chat box. We're going to reserve some time at the very end of our program to answer your questions or to read your comments and interact. So you can put them in throughout the program, or you can put them in at the very end, and we will get to that. Today's program would not be possible without the support from Rockwell Automation. We are so grateful for their support throughout the year with our Seasons of Caring, volunteering, and just different events that they do. We are honored to have Patricia Contreras, Vice President of Global Public Affairs at Rockwell Automation, with us. And Patricia, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dan. It is my pleasure to join you here today as we continue our journey with United Way. Our journey goes back many years, and we're so proud to volunteer with United Way and its partner agencies. It's just tremendous, the impact that we continue to have on our community. But as we look at evolving that work, it's really around transformational volunteerism, really around changing the narrative and helping our employees to understand systemic racism and what's leading to segregation in Milwaukee, and just many topics that a lot of our employees are privileged not to experience and to see and to learn about. And so this journey that we're taking our employees through, and we're glad we're taking our community through, is to really understand, when we're serving our communities, to understand the dynamics that are in play and the role that we can play to improving those. And I'm really excited about today's conversation. As a mother of a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, I am smack dab in the middle of talking to my children about what it means to be Latina, what it means to have brown skin, what it means to grow up in a suburb in Milwaukee where the children in their classroom don't always look like them or speak the same language as they do. And it's really empowering to have those conversations, but oftentimes they ask me tough questions and I pause a little and I don't want to say the right thing, or I don't want to say the wrong thing. And it's sometimes paralyzing and confusing and exhausting. And so when we started talking about, what are the topics that we really need to unpack, this one was one that stood out for us. And we couldn't have done this without United Way and the amazing team at Flying Elephant. And so I'd love to introduce you to my friend Deanna. I've known her for over a decade. The second I met her, I knew I wanted to be her friend. She was such a powerful first impression when she was really talking about her purpose. And I just gravitate to her energy and always learn from her. Deanna is a highly respected thought leader who travels the world motivating and educating audiences about living with joy and purpose. She's a champion for marginalized communities and an inspiration to all those who want to be change agents in their work, in their lives, and society. And she not only teaches us, but she also walks the walk. And I'm just really lucky to call her a friend. She is joined by Justin, her partner, who is a professor who teaches ethnic studies, African American studies, and ethnic minority literature. He has published numerous journals and books on the issues of race and identity politics, exploring the ways to bridge the gap between who we are and who we must become to achieve more equitable world for others. Please join me in welcoming Deanna and Justin.
Oh, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Patricia, thank you very much for the introduction. It is an honor to call you a friend. Also, it's also an honor to be able to partner with Rockwell Automation, with Amy and the rest of the team at the United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County. I cannot tell you how many times I spend bragging about both of those organizations and the way that you involve all of the people in your teams, but also the way that you show up in the community. Because it's one thing to do stuff inside your own house. It's another thing to do something outside in the neighborhood where everybody can benefit from it. And you do a marvelous job at both of those things. And you're just awesome people. It's been fun working with all of you and building this and dreaming about how we might be able to be of service to the greater community. So thank you for the honor of being able to be here with all of you today. And thank you to everybody who signed in. Before we started, we talked about just how much joy it brings us to know that there are people who would set aside some time in their day to be with us, to have this kind of a conversation, that it's on your mind enough and it's that important that you believe in making sure you can shore yourself up and really get your skills to the place that you want it to be so that our kids can benefit from it. And so that is also really awesome. So thank you to everybody who logged in. So in this time, we have a lot of things that Justin and I wanted to pack it. Yeah.
Packed it all in. So buckle your seatbelts.
Right. No, we're going. We're going to be full speed ahead. But there's a couple things that we wanted to do. First, we wanted to start off just by giving a little context as to who we are and why we're doing this. Then what we wanted to do is share a personal story with you that really brings a lot of what we're talking about today to a head and allows for us to kind of unpack some of the strategies we're going to give you. I promise you, one of the best things about our time today is going to be that when you walk away, you are going to have 10 tips. 10. That was a cool thing you just did. 10 suggestions and ways that you can actually facilitate a conversation with the children in your life, whether they're your nieces or nephews, or whether they're your own children or your students, or kids in the neighborhood that you're mentoring, whoever it might be, that you can actually use as you're having these conversations. So one of the things that's really important to us is to make sure that we have time for Q&A. So if you have any questions, make sure that you go ahead and put the questions in the chat, because if you put the questions in the chat, what we'll do at the end is we will facilitate a Q&A. So we'll try and answer any of the questions that you have there. So just a couple things before we get started. It's really important to Justin and I and to the rest of the teams, everybody who's been putting this together, that we make sure that this is a safe space. People are coming here because they don't have all the answers, nor do we have all the answers. We're here to learn too. This is a place where we're looking for guidance, we're looking for support, and that's what we're going to deliver. So please make sure that you honor that. Anybody who's, we feel like is violating that will be politely exited, right? Because we want to make sure that we're honoring that and that everybody gets a chance to do that. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to honor that 1 hour time limit. Justin and I have the biggest clock ever made over here on the side to keep us honest. We know that
half the light you see on us is from the digital glow of this huge clock.
So we want to make sure that we do that, but we also are trying to work really, really hard to make sure that we have time for questions. So if you feel like we're going fast, it's with intention, because we didn't want to take out any material, but we also wanted to make sure that we offered that time for Q&A. Make sure that you use that chat even for questions, but you can also use it if there's other resources that you have. That's the space for us to be able to support one another. If there's a question that you have that you feel a little bit uncomfortable about, you can direct chat it to us and we'll try and monitor at least the direct chat. But otherwise, we have people from the team who are monitoring the chat to help with other questions. And if you don't mind turning on your cameras, we know that sometimes it can be uncomfortable, but if you don't mind, we'd love it, because it's nice to see your beautiful faces on this cold day here in Milwaukee.
All right, so a little bit about us. Like Patricia said during the introduction, I'm a professor who teaches classes in ethnic studies. I've been doing so for 2 decades now. And most of the time, almost all the time that I've done it, it's been to mostly rural Wisconsin white students who've never talked about race. They reach full-on adulthood, 18 years, they've never talked about it. And what I've found is that by no means are they to blame for that situation. Race becomes such an important issue in the United States and continues to be so precisely because we learn not to talk about it. And what I've found, and what's really interesting, is with enough patience, compassion, and practice, people even who have no experience in talking about these things or confronting them, they start to improve their empathy, they start to improve their understanding, and we all advance.
So I actually have the great fortune of being able to run a company called Flying Elephant. And Flying Elephant has 4 organizations that all fold into it. They're all social enterprises, so designed to try and create a change. But they all have a focus on equity and inclusion. At Uplifting Impact, what I do is I coach and we train and we help build leadership around diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's really where we are presenting from today. We also have a podcast that comes out of that organization. There's another company called Purposeful Hustle. It's all about finding your purpose and then figuring out how you get into that space. So we do a lot of leadership work there. We have another organization called Birth Coach Milwaukee, because unfortunately Milwaukee has some very high birth disparities. And so one of the things we did was start a doula service where we can provide support before, during, and after to people, so we can try and help close the disparities that we see in our beautiful city. And the last company is called Story to Tell Books. And Story to Tell Books is not actually run specifically by us. It's run by our children who are 8 and 12 years old. And there's another session we're going to be doing next month, February 11th, and they will be leading that session, because we have another company called Story to Tell Books, and that company is really focused on putting out books that feature positive images of children of color. And then the kids take the profits from those book sales, and they actually redistribute them to other organizations like the United Way that are supporting positive images of children of color. So we've been doing this for a really long time, but if you can see, even in all those 4 companies, you should be able to see that there's a theme. And the theme for us is really around what we define as our purpose, which is shifting power to marginalized communities. So for us, that's the biggest thing. And I think it's the thing that really connects us to the work that the United Way does. I think it's what really connects us to Rockwell and the community service that you're doing, because we are only as good and as strong as everybody else is around us. And so making sure that we are figuring out how we can pull people from the margins so that everybody can thrive is a really critical component to what we do. Another important thing for you to understand is the reason why we're so close in this COVID world is because we're married. We're in the same house. We are celebrating this year, actually 21 will be our 16 years of marriage.
Yeah.
Wow, buddy. We've also been best friends since we were 10 years old. And like we said, we have 2 children who are 8 and 12, who have been our primary teachers for some of the content we're going to talk about today.
I know, I feel like we're cheating off of them. We just took a cheat sheet from the stuff they told us or the stuff they've asked us. And so that brings us to a little bit of why are we doing this? Well, the primary reason is we were asked. I mean, we've done, like, my work has always been in the academy and the universities, and it's really deep and theoretical and kind of removed. But after George Floyd's killing, we started to get more and more people asking us, especially during that week following it, texting us, having conversations with us, emailing us, saying, yeah, you know, based on the work that you folks do, how would you go about talking to your kids? And I think by Saturday, we started composing longer and longer texts, longer and longer emails. And by that Saturday, we said, you know, maybe we should host a virtual town hall meeting where people can just kind of talk, share ideas, and we can kind of informally tell them some of the mistakes we've made so they can learn from what we've done. And we put an announcement out on Saturday night for a town hall meeting that would be virtual that Monday night, and the room completely filled. And we did it multiple times since then. So it really started from this groundswell of demand and eagerness about people realizing a change needs to happen, and really inspiring us with their dedication and how much time and energy they're putting into changing things and improving the world.
So I think another thing to understand is, like, we were in this moment where it was like, oh my gosh, this is so heavy and this is so hard, right? And we felt really helpless, to be honest, because it felt like, and I know that in this moment, in this last year, think of all the things that we have experienced as a community, right? It has felt heavy and hard. And I think we were just like, man, I don't even know what to do. I can't leave my house. I can't do some of the things that I might normally do to show my love or my support, or to show up in this moment to try and help our community heal. And so part of the reason why we were doing this is because we were hurting. And we were looking for something that we could do that could be impactful. We really, really wanted to serve. We saw that people were also hurting and also confused, and we felt like this is a way for us to do it. And so thank you for allowing us to be an extension of our own self-care, right? And trying to figure out how we can serve. But there are some things that we just want to make sure that you understand. The content that we are going to share with you today is really coming from the perspective of DEI experts, right? People who spend a lot of time writing, talking, studying this kind of content. The other place that we're coming to you from is as parents and as educators, as people who have spent a lot of time with children in those two worlds. But we are not child psychologists and we are not social workers. Those are amazing professions. They do amazing work. And we just wanted to make sure that we said that right up front. One of the things that has been really affirming is that we've talked to a lot of child psychologists and we've talked to a lot of social workers, and they have
run our information by them, like, is
we okay?
okay?
Yeah. And we've gotten the thumbs up, but we just want to acknowledge that there are so many things that are happening. And so, some of that needs to come through those filters too. So there's a number of reasons why we could be the people that people are reaching out to, right? They know that we do DEI work. They know that we're into this, equity space. They know that we talk a lot. They know that we really care. So there's probably those reasons they reached out to us. But unfortunately, there's some other things that have happened that have been really tragic in both of our own lives that have been race-based tragedies. I, as a child, lost one of my primary caretakers to two white supremacists who took his life. And after he was murdered, I actually couldn't talk for a couple of weeks. It took me a while to literally find my voice. In 2012, when the Sikh temple was, when there was the massacre at the Sikh temple, we were actually, my family and I, my son was just born, we were actually at the other Sikh temple, not the one in Oak Creek, but the one in Brookfield, when all of the, fully armed police officers came into our worship space. We were actively involved in trying to help with the Sherman Park, protests. And so we were really deeply engaged in brokering some of that peaceful resolution. So there's a number of places where this has impacted us on a very, very personal level. But the story that we're actually going to share today is one that is, we think, probably the most relevant to some of the conversations that your children may be having with you right now.
All right. Forgive us for one moment here. So I think what is most relevant to what we're talking about today is a story that happened to me. And it's the story that happens to people who have children in their lives. It's this magical moment where there's that first night where they are away. I love my kids, but our eldest was 4 at the time and our youngest was 1. So this was the first time where I said, wait, hold on a second, I can sleep in? So they were spending the night at my parents', and for the first time and as long as I could remember, I could have slept in. But if you take care of children, the dirty trick is they train you to wake up every 2 hours, but then they learn how to sleep through the whole night, but you've already been trained to continue to wake up every 2 hours. So even though they were gone, I found myself wide awake at 5 a.m. and I said, what am I going to do with this? If I can't sleep, what else can I do that I normally couldn't do when they're here? So I said, you know what? It's time to work 4 years of not jogging. It's time to work off some of that. So I decided I'm going to go out for a run. So I laced up my dad's shoes, which were sad. They were full of nothing but grass stain because the only times I used these jogging shoes was to cut the lawn. And then I put on my sweatshirt, my dad's sweatshirt with the paint stains on it, because the only time I used a sweatshirt wasn't to sweat during exercise. It was for painting. And then I put in my old outdated headphones and was playing some dad music like Bach cello sonatas. And I said, okay, I'm going to go for a run. And I'm jogging along. It's about 5:40 in the morning and it's springtime in Wisconsin. So it's cold, but just starting to get warm and you can feel the sun starting to rise. And I'm not running the way I used to, but I'm feeling pretty good about myself. I start jogging along, feeling good. And in the distance, I hear sirens. Oh, okay, it's just normal part of being in the city. And I look down at my dad's shoes with the grass stains and they're chopping along faster than I ever thought I could go at this stage. I said, all right, I'm feeling good. Then all of a sudden, in addition to the one pair of sirens, I hear another. I said, oh, okay, I hope everything's okay. Something big must be going on. But I'm looking at my sweatshirt arms with all the paint stains and they're chopping along. I'm feeling good. And then all of a sudden I start to hear a whole lot more sirens happening. I said, well, there's nothing I can do about it. I'm just going to continue running. And my Bach cello sonatas are really urging me along and I'm really cooking at this stage. And then these high beams crawl out of the alley. And they make the shadows really long. The high beams start to turn, spreading those shadows of the evergreens and the trees across the yard that I'm running past. And then they turn and they blind me and they clap on me. And so I stop. I hear a car door open. I hear freeze, put up your hands. So I stop, freeze, and put up my hands. Then I hear a gun unholstered. Get down on the ground. So I do. And while I'm down there, I hear the screech of another car, 3 more squad cars, the claps of their high beams on me, all their car doors opening, all sorts of people yelling at me, all sorts of different commands. And I know what's happening. I feel someone's knee go on my back. I feel them wrench my arms behind me. I feel the handcuffs clip around my wrists. And I feel myself brought up, put into a squad car, and swifted away. But during this whole time, I've never told why I was arrested, never Mirandized, never asked a single question. But I know if there's this many officers for just me, they're scared of something. And I know, stay quiet, stay calm, because if they're this scared, the only thing I can do, anything I say, any resistance I give, any rebuttal or questioning I offer can be interpreted as aggressive behavior that gives justification to their fear and can make this bad situation a whole lot worse. I'm taken to the police station. They take away my dad's shoes. They take away my sweatshirt. They take away my headphones. And they put me in a cell for hours. This whole time, I don't even know why I'm there. Then finally, they bring me to a room for questioning and say, did anyone tell you why you were arrested? And I say, no. The entire tone of the room changes. And they say, oh, there was a robbery that happened nearby, or actually a burglary that happened nearby, and you match the description. Did anyone ask you any questions about where you were? No. What were you doing? Jogging. Did you make any indication to tell them this, or did anybody ask you about this? Did anybody say, why are you wearing these things? No, none of that. A few hours later, they drop me off. I go home, and I have to go into the house and explain this as calmly as I can.
I was not calm. I was waiting for my husband, and I was trying to figure out where he was, right? At first I was like, oh, he ran. Oh, maybe he went to Rocket Baby. Oh, maybe he, saw somebody, a friend. And I'm making up all of these, things in my mind. And then I'm trying to call him on his cell phone. He's not picking up, but I know his running shoes are gone. So I'm getting more and more concerned as time is passing. And when he came in, I saw this look on his face and he said, I need you to sit down. I thought maybe something was wrong with the children, right? Because it was the first day that they had gone. So I'm going through all the panic. And Justin tells me this, experience. And I had to experience all those hours that he had gone through in this situation in a matter of moments. And I had every emotion. I wish I could tell you that I handled it gracefully, but I did not. I had every emotion, every word I could think of was coming out of my mouth at the same time. I was both crying and just all the things, because before my eyes flashed all the possibilities of the ways that things could have gone differently. And so it was a hard moment for us. And it was a hard moment for us to try and figure out what is it, we're going to do and how are we going to respond to it. We won't go into all the details of that because we don't have the moment for it right now. But one of the biggest things that needed to happen was we needed to figure out what we were going to do and how we were going to talk to our children. So, my son's 4, the other one's 1. So, not much conversation, no long conversations happening at this point. But we said, this is what happened. My son was just like, oh, okay. Asked a couple questions. I can't even remember what really. And then he moved on and we didn't talk about it. And after a while, it took a really long time actually for us to get, to a place where we were able to move in a rhythm. So fast forward 4 years and now our 4-year-old is 8 years old. And he was actually performing in Black Nativity at the Marcus Center. And I remember, he's a very jolly child. He always has been. And I remember I, took him to the practice. And, this is when there was Black Lives Matters protests happening kind of downtown. And there was things that were going on around him. And he was starting to experience, and we were starting to have some conversations about some of the things that he was seeing. Well, he, came home and before he even went to practice that morning, he had asked us a question about Black Lives Matter. And we were kind of talking about things and he was saying well, why does this happen? And we decided, we should tell him. We should tell him the full story again, even though we kind of did when he was 4, he didn't really remember it. We should tell him again. And so we did. Justin explained it and everything. And he was quiet for a second. This is at breakfast. He got quiet. He asked a couple of follow-up questions, but then he got back to his normal cheery self, right? And he was okay and he moved on. So take him to practice later on that evening. pick him up. It's around 8:30, 9 o'clock. I pick him up. He comes, he's got his huge backpack. He gets into the back seat of the car and I'm like, hey, how you doing? Right. Again, normally very chipper child. We had this conversation in the morning, but I thought we were good. And all of a sudden, floodgates. I didn't even get to pull off from the curb. I'm like, what is going on? What happened to my baby? Right. So I jump out of the car, barely parked, and jump in the back seat. And he takes a while to just calm down. He's shaking with fear and sadness. I'm like, what happened? What happened? And he looks up at me, and the first thing he says through his tears is, what if they had killed Daddy? I want everybody to stop for a second. In the midst of all that's going on, in the midst of everything that we've seen, in the midst of everything our children have seen, I think we all deserve a breath. So go ahead and take one. What we learned through that experience and through a number of other experiences where we have had to have these really difficult conversations with our children about the impact, right, of what is going around with us and what is happening from a racial inequity standpoint, has given us an opportunity to put together some tips. And that is what we want to share with all of you today.
All right. So take out something to write with, something to write on. We're going to go through a list of 10 things that helped us and hopefully will help you talk to kids about race. Our first item is prioritize your kids. Number one, prioritize your kids. Now, you have a right to your emotions, and you have to make time to process your feelings. So if you need to, drive around the block and scream into the steering wheel, more power to you. However, in the situation with your children, the children in your life, it's important to give them space for them to feel. They're constantly looking to us for cues. The metaphor that we like to use is if you see a toddler walking around and they barely are walking and they fall, they'll immediately look to the parent or to an adult and say, how am I supposed to feel about what just happened? If we laugh, they're laughing. If we freak out, they will start to freak out. So again, you have to be honest with yourself about your emotions and make space for you to feel those things and even honestly convey those emotions to the children. That, I'm really upset. However, we want to create an emotional environment where children feel empowered. If we panic, if we fall apart, every time we even talk about these racial issues, we send the message to children, these problems are insurmountable. They're so terrifying, there's nothing we can do. So whatever it takes for you to feel your feelings, but also create an emotional environment where you're talking with the children and they can feel, but also they can look to you for those cues and it's going to be all right. We will find ways to overcome this.
Another really important tip. So this is number 2, and we have 10 friends. So make sure you're keeping tabs. But number 2 is to ask them what they know. Now, I will get the question all the time, like, do I ask little ones what they know? But here's the thing. Children are making race-based decisions at 3 months old. The research shows it. They're making decisions about who their friends are going to be, who they think is smart, who they think they can have conversations with. They're making all kinds of decisions at very, very young ages, much more complex than we actually give them credit for. And so taking the time to, before you launch into anything, into any big speech that you want to give, saying, what do you know about this topic is really, really important. I guarantee you will be surprised on more than one occasion by what they will tell you. Until COVID, we didn't even have a television in our home. And I was always taken aback by how much our kids knew about what was happening, from a current event standpoint, because they're talking with one another. They're hearing things at school. They're hearing things on Zoom. They're hearing things right in passing. And so they have some information that you should know and you should be aware of, like where they're actually coming from. The problem is we often aren't quiet enough to let them talk. So I had a diversity, equity. I know we're going to preach a little bit here to ourselves and to you. Okay. But
she's never said it that way before. So if I can't say amen, I'll just say ouch.
But another thing that we have noticed, right, like, is that one of our DEI counterparts said that in his 45 years of doing the work, right, he's been doing work in civil rights and also is just an amazing, amazing person. He said one of the most profound conversations he ever had was when he decided he was going to sit in the back of a room and watch a group of children who are about 8, I think 9 years old to 13, 14 years old, have a conversation about race. He's like, as a DEI leader, it was hard to sit in the back and not say anything. But I couldn't
Well, actually, if you look at Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896.
But, you know, to be able to take that moment and just give the children the opportunity to share what they know, it's really important, because every teacher will tell you that one of the most, best tricks in pedagogy is to first make sure that people understand and can express what their starting point is, and that they have recognition of their starting point.
All right. Number 3, provide facts, not editorials. Number 3, provide facts, not editorials. So after you've asked the children, what do you know? And you've kind of seen the opportunity for like where they're starting at, but also where they kind of convey what they're interested in. Then you kind of say, okay, let's kind of look at some information, maybe like providing some right sizing, like maybe some of the ideas are way off and you just kind of, like the bumpers and the bumper bolding, you just kind of nudge them back to the middle a little bit. But when we do this, I think it's important, one, that it just doesn't come off the top of our heads, that we kind of show together, like we do research alongside each other, and we look at just facts and not editorialize it and see these facts mean this, and this is why this, and this is why this. Even if, especially when it comes to something as big and as important as social justice, it's really hard not to do this. However, we all know children will reach the stage where they need, and natural human development, where they need individuation. And an enormous part of that individuation is individuating from us. So if we editorialize this call for social justice so much that the children in our lives identify it with us as one and the same, when it comes time for them to individuate from us or rebel against us, they will also do the same with these facts that you've brought them. They'll say, my parents always brainwashed me with this stuff. So if I'm going to think on my own, I've got to get away from it. However, if you provide just facts, and we say, help them gather the dots, but let them connect those dots, then they'll have a much more greater sense of ownership, responsibility, and see it as, hey, this is something I built, as opposed to something that was built for me and imposed on me.
Another really important thing, so this is number 4, is to use appropriate words and examples. So after George Floyd's murder, I took 2 walks with my children, and I took 2 walks separately. I knew that I needed to talk to them a little bit differently than I was going to be talking to one, they're 4 years apart. So talking to them with different language and different examples. So for my 8-year-old, right, when we were walking around, I said to him, what does it feel like when you feel like people aren't listening to you? And he said, well, it doesn't feel great. And I was like, well, can you think of any examples? And he said his brother, right? Like his big brother, like, oh yeah, I know. I know what that feels like. And I say, well, in that situation, what do you do, right? How do you respond to that? And he said, well, sometimes I get louder, right? Or sometimes I do this. And I said, yeah. So if somebody was, feeling like a little bit out of sorts, or they were feeling like somebody wasn't listening to them, what are some things that they might do? And he was able to have a very, very deep, I think, and very thoughtful conversation. He's a deep and thoughtful kid anyways, but deep and thoughtful conversation about what that feels like and how people might respond, and why it was important for people to be able to feel heard, and what we could do to help people who felt like they weren't being heard. Now, with my eldest son, what we talked about was a little bit more like on the nose, right? In the sense that we talked about, with people of color in particular, what are some things that they have done in the past that were peaceful things? And he was able to go through some things that he has read about, things that he's seen, moments that he's participated in. And then we were able to say, and how did that work out? What were the changes that happened? What was great about that and what wasn't? And so it was really directed at a lot of questions, but we could use different entry points with both of the children. And so some of you on this call, I know, have really littles. If you come at them and let me just put my own business out there on the street. One day, my kids, they were probably 2 and 6. Okay. We're sitting in the car and they were talking about a question about housing. And they asked me this question, and I pull over my car with my 2 and 6-year-old in the back, drinking their little juice boxes. And I'm like, let me tell you about redlining. And you know what? And when the housing, and I go into this whole thing, my kids are in the back, like, so when I came home, I'm like, Justin, I did a thing. It was not the right thing, right? Like, why did I go on this whole legal speech? I mean, it literally lasted about 20 minutes, right? A whole legal speech about housing segregation and housing laws. And that wasn't appropriate for where they were. Now, telling them that there were laws and being able to break it down, that would have been different, but that is not what I did. I mean, I basically gave like a law school class on housing to a 6-year-old.
There were 6 and 2 at the time.
Yeah, right. So you have to make sure that you're paying attention to what's going to be age appropriate for them and using that kind of language.
All right. Number 5, let them ask questions. Number 5, let them ask questions. And Patricia mentioned this in her introductions. The children are starting to get to the edge where they're asking the really tough questions, and you're terrified. Like, I don't want to say the wrong thing, or I don't want to say the thing that might be wrong for them, even if it's accurate and factual. It incites a lot of anxiety and worry, because as parents, we somehow feel the pressure to have all the answers. No one actually told adults, you have to have the answer for every question a child asks you, but somehow we deputize ourselves and say, we are the font of all wisdom and knowledge. There's nothing a child can ask me that I don't know. You can surrender that contract. You never were asked to sign it. You shouldn't have signed it if you did. And actually, it's more beneficial to children to see that you don't know stuff. To muster the courage to have them ask questions. It's the same thing where we ask them, okay, so what do you know? But also give them opportunity to ask questions and reveal what they're interested in. What do you want answers to? And the example that Deanna pointed out, they might not be interested in the history of racial segregation and redlining laws in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They might be more interested in something else. So if you give them opportunity to ask questions, that does not mean you have to provide the answers for all of them. It can be as simple as, all right, so what are you interested in? What questions do you have? And you just write down those questions. What that does is it tells the child, I've heard what you say. I've validated what you said and its importance. And writing it down buys you time to maybe come up with possible answers, or even better, to collect the whole list of questions that they're really interested in and say, I don't know. It's the most powerful thing you can say to a child's question. And it's the most empowering to them. Wait, hold on a second. Adults don't have the answer to everything. And follow up with, I don't know. Let's find out together. That increases the likelihood that a child will come up with questions and answers that are important to them, but also stick with them.
So another thing that I think is really important, and this is something that we learned directly from our children, it was really reinforced, is that it's important for you while you're doing all this, listening to things, giving them access to information, looking for facts, doing all of that, that you're also being mindful of the content that you're curating and where that content is coming from. Because one of the things that I think has been really, really tough, and I think I didn't really realize it until my son said something to me about it, was just how much trauma some of this information can create. Right? So curating the content is number 6, curate your content, because secondhand trauma is a real thing. I know as an adult, I cannot watch videos of people getting murdered. I can't even watch movies, where I know it's fake and that's happening. But when it's real, I especially can't do it. I was in a hotel lobby and there was a news show that was showing, clips and I had to leave the space. They had to bring my luggage out to me because I felt like I couldn't breathe. Now, if I'm having that feeling as an adult who understands all of these different things, how do you think it's impacting our children and the volume at which they are seeing some of these things? And so my son actually said to me, you know what, I really want to know what's going on, but I can't handle all of these details. And I think it's important for us to recognize that in the midst of what we're doing, we have to make sure that we're curating content and that the content isn't always negative. I think that's the other thing that I would just highlight here is that sometimes people are like, oh, to talk about race. And the first thing they think about is it has to be negative. But but it doesn't. And if we buy into that philosophy, then that's what makes people feel like, oh, you know what, this is a taboo topic. I can't talk about it because it's always negative. No, there are wonderful and positive and amazing ways to talk about race. So make sure that when you're pulling in content, you're bringing in positive, amazing things about all of the different races that we have in our beautiful world, in addition to some of the challenges that we still have in front of us.
And that brings me to point number 7, which is be proactive. Number 7, be proactive. And to piggyback on what Deanna was saying, you should not be talking about race only when bad things happen. In 2 regards. 1, you should be talking about them before the next trauma happens. You should be talking about them before the next tragedy happens. You should be talking about them in ways that are safer, that are more proactive, that are on your terms, instead of simply responding to the next awful thing. The second thing is also making sure that you're being proactive and, like Deanna said, not just talking about the awful things. That you're having opportunities where children can see ethnic and racial difference in a positive light. It's important on the flip side to not just make it all celebratory, to not take history and water it down and make it seem like everything is just and fair, to confront injustice, but at the same time, make sure that for the child that you're balancing it with the benefits and the awesome positivity that comes from celebrating multiculturalism. So be proactive, don't wait for the bad stuff to happen, and make sure that it's not just all bad stuff.
Now, this next trick number 8 is to show your work. And I learned this from all the amazing educators I've had the opportunity to observe and to really learn from. What do our teachers tell us when we're kids? When we're at the board, right? Do you remember this? I remember this. You know, I want to get to the answer really fast, just like scribble. And no, I would always get show your work, show your work, show your work. Well, there is a lot of wisdom in that idea. Right. So when we're talking about showing your work and we're talking about having conversations about racial equity and we're talking about how to talk about race, what we're talking about really here is modeling for our children what's important and how some of these discussions can happen. So it's really important in a way that might seem a little bit uncomfortable or might seem a little bit unnatural to share what you are thinking, what you are doing, what you are feeling, where you're getting your language from, how you're researching. And I think what's really important is what mistakes are you making?
Mm-hmm. And to show the children in your life that it's not like you reach a certain age and then you get hit with a lightning bolt and you know everything. Because that's the image that a lot of adults project. Mm-hmm. Don't ask me anything because I already know everything. As opposed to saying, hey, learning is a lifelong process, and taking them along that process and seeing how it works and how it happens, full of its successes, full of its failures, full of its confusion, full of its tornado in your brain, as I see in the comments. Yes, that's important. And it helps empower children to say, hey, this tornado that's happening in my brain, all the confusion, the insecurity and fear I feel, that is important, that is natural, that is common. Hey, even this know-it-all adult goes through the same thing. That helps them feel like racism is conquerable. All right, so we have a little bit of recap. So 1, prioritize your kids. 2, ask them what they know. 3, provide facts, not editorials. 4, use age-appropriate words and examples. 5, let them ask questions. 6, curate content. 7, be proactive. And 8, show your work, which brings us to 9. 9 is share your values. Share your values. Think about you are a team leader, and the team is your family, or the team is your class, or the team is the network of children you have in your life. Think about what other organizations you belong to that have a mission statement, that have a value statement, that have all these things spelled out. This is who we are. This is what we believe. This is what we're trying to do. Why don't we do it with our families, the most important institution we belong to? So maybe that's a fun project you can do as a family with your kids. Hey, as a family, what are our 5 core principles? Or as
a team, or as a whatever it is, your group, or as a class, any one of those
What
spaces.
things do we believe? what are our core values? What's important to us? Because I think what makes things more difficult is when these tragedies happen, if children have only been told their entire life, society is just and fair, bad things only happen to bad people, good things only happen and always happen to good people. The law is fair, police always do the right thing. When there's stuff that happens that's wrong, think about how much we set them up for terrible, awful, terrifying situations when we don't expose them to injustice. We think we're protecting them, but when injustice happens, if they've never thought that it was a possibility, it sends the message the world is falling apart. However, if you make as part of your core values, injustice exists. However, we fight for justice. It is something that is possible. It is something that we do, but it is not something that it currently exists. And it's not something that is inevitably just going to happen. Then all of a sudden, when bad things happen, they have a language. Oh, yes, we were warned that this was going to happen. But we also know that it's important to work to change it. So whatever that means for your group, for your team, for your set of children, create some sort of shared values and have them participate in explaining it.
Number 10 is the hardest one, but it's also the most important. Number 10 is to repeat.
Ad nauseum, ad infinitum, ad exasperatum, everything. Yes, always.
Always. We find ourselves in these constant loops where, and I think this is one of the things that we teach, especially when we're talking about adults. And a lot of people ask us about how to translate some of what we've talked about into the work setting. And one of the things that we always emphasize is that if you don't have this as part of your norm, you know, having conversations, being able to talk about these things, sharing this information, bringing people along, if that's not a part of like how you normally go about work, and how you normally go about conversations across your dinner table, or how you normally go about conversations with the young people that you are working with, then it's more difficult. It doesn't get easier, it gets harder. So making sure that this is a constant thing that you are constantly coming back to, what can we do and how are we having these conversations and how are we bringing our children along? Because the thing is, we're still trying to do these things. We still fail at them. We're still practicing them. This is an evolution. There's not like one single destination. This is an opportunity that keeps on giving, right? Keeps on giving you the ways that you can actually improve. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that as we go out of these 10, and somebody asked, can we share these? We absolutely can share these with you. So we'll make sure we figure out your emails and we send them all to your emails. But one of the things that I think is really, really important as we think about these 10 things is that we have to remember that there's a reason why you showed up here today. We have to remember that there is an obligation that we have, a responsibility that we have to the young people who are in our spaces and the young people who are in our spheres of influence. So I want you to think about what we just talked about. You might not remember all 10. Like I said, we'll give you the list. In the moment, you might be like, oh, what did they say? What was number 5? So think about, why did you come here today? Why is this even important to you? What are some of the things that you can anticipate, right? And what are the ones that are really going to make a difference in the spaces that you occupy, that you can actually take these things and implement them? So thank you so much for letting us go through our list of 10. I think that we're bringing back Patricia.
Thank you so much, Sienna and Justin. I cannot wait to watch that back. I can't wait to share with all my mommy friends. I loved all 10 tips, but I'm especially processing a combo of 6 and 7. You know, my goal is to be ensuring that my children feel seen, they feel loved, they feel a sense of belonging. And one of the ways we do that is bedtime stories. And 2 of our favorites are I Am a Girl of Color and I Am a Boy of Color. And for those of you that don't own those books, go get them and join us on February 11th. You're in for a treat. At 7 p.m., I will have my children there with me. Join Deanna. This is a family-friendly event. Her children, Zephaniah and Zion, will be reading I Am a Boy of Color, and really talking through positive words and just what a beautiful way to go to bed with just positive affirmations. And as we look at that age range of who this is appropriate for, ideal for kindergarten through 5th graders, but for the older children, they're also going to be talking about the writing and publishing process. Our community is so blessed to have this amazing family, and I hope you will join us for that event. We are also ending this series with how to talk about race conversation starter cards. It's an upcoming event for us next month. Watch for details, participants. So we're looking for volunteers to sign up to assemble these cards that will be distributed to schools and families throughout our 4-county community as a way to talk about race, equity, and inclusion for middle and high school students. These cards have been created by Deanna and her very talented team. Go to the United Way website to learn more. There's additional opportunities on the tab on the homepage where you can look at all the opportunities that are available that are safe and COVID friendly, especially some MLK Junior inspired activities, and you'll see those listed there. And we have one more way for you to engage with us. Again, quick reminder, we have a couple minutes left. So as I'm going through this, start writing your questions down in the chat. Our last way to engage is we are looking at raising $10,000 throughout the month of February, and we need your help to get us there. Your donation to reducing barriers to employment and advancement will allow United Way to invest in agencies that are doing this hard work each and every day in our community to address the 4 pillars of education, training, and credentials, transportation, involvement in the justice system, and diverse talent retention. You can find more on the website. There's also going to be a link to that here in this chat, and Rockwell Automation is matching that $10,000. So what a better incentive than to go in there and give. That's it. I tried to go as fast as I can. Dan, I think we have a couple of questions. I know a lot of great dialogue and conversation going, but is there any specific questions that we have?
Yes, first of all, thank you, Patricia, and thank you for the matching donation. That is unbelievably great. Thank you, Deanna and Justin, some great information. Let's just start, as questions are coming in. Deanna, just tell us a little bit about the conversation cards and why you decided to create those and what the plans are for those.
Sure. So one of the things that we know is really tough, and it was kind of the impetus for even starting the children's book imprint and some of the other work that we've done and the conversation that we had, and having this, is that sometimes people are like, I don't know where I can go. I don't have any resources for this. I feel like I want to start these conversations, but maybe I don't know, some of the definitions, or maybe I don't have good questions that I could ask, or I need a tool. I need a resource. And I know that I certainly feel that way with, areas that are new to me. So as we were thinking, and as we were talking to educators and talking to parents and talking to community leaders, this kept coming up again and again, like, how do we even start it? What does this even look like? And so we decided to actually take some of the bigger questions that we get and some of the ones that we are able to, that we think are really allow for you to do something cool in your community, or do something cool in your neighborhood, or do something cool just in the world. And so what we did is we came up with kind of 3 different things. One is like learning cards. So there's some definitions and things like that. One are question cards. So there's a whole stack of like, here are some great questions that you can really use to start conversations. And then my favorite ones, there's some challenge cards. So there's some things that you can do, as a family, or do as a team, or do as a group, to really challenge yourself. And so we wanted to give, again, just another resource for people to be able to engage in some of these conversations.
Here's a question that came in, and some of this may apply, but I know we talked a little bit about being very young, but do you have any suggestions on resources of how to start the conversations with very young kids? This particular person said the son is 14 months old, like to start the conversation as soon as possible. What is an age appropriate time to start having these conversations?
And I think the sooner the better, but obviously knowing your individual children in your life, different personalities at different stages of life and different interests, I think it's kind of depending on how young and depending on your particular circumstances. Sometimes it's not as direct as, hey, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this thing, as much as creating opportunities for the discussion to organically arise at all. Like, we're already, there might be some parents out there like, the kid never watches TV and we never do. But like, chances are many of us are watching TV every once in a while, engaging with social media, doing some sort of forms of entertainment. We're already seeking out entertainment already. So if we find entertainment that highlights ignored voices, overlooked experiences, they can create the opportunity to start bringing up these questions, to start discussing this. So if you're dealing with children that are really young, I think one of the most important steps that we have is let them ask questions. So kind of a step before that is to create circumstances where those questions will naturally arise.
Mhm.
So that would be kind of the first step that we'd have, but also to not underestimate what kids already know and what they're already aware of. We have lots of times where we have people contact us and say, oh, my child's only 5. And we say, chances are they already know about this stuff. Chances are they're already thinking about these things. And we also work a lot with adult organizations and adults about this precise thing about how do I talk about race with my team? And they always talk about, I don't know how to do this. I'm in my 30s, I'm in my 40s, I'm a full-on adult, but I've never learned how to do this. And one of the things that they cite is I was taught not to talk about it because my parents ignored it all the time. Or they shushed me every time I asked a question, or they would kind of talk about it with raised tones, like, this is a marvelous day. I went to the store and I met Janice, and she was there with her boyfriend who's Black. These little cues start to teach children, if we don't talk about these issues, they're bad, and you're not supposed to talk about them.
Yeah.
So whatever you can do to create the environment to make it seem natural to talk about it in whatever ways they want to.
Yeah, that's excellent. Thank you. Another question came in talking about tips for change for families that are multiracial. In this instance, its parents are white and children are Black.
I think one of the most important things, no matter, of the tips that we just shared, I wouldn't change any of the tips. I think that they are relevant across all demographics, because everybody is looking, at the core of our tips, it's being heard and being seen and being able to express your thoughts, right, and process them. So I think that those apply across all. I think one thing that's really important, like if I was going to emphasize one of them when it's multiracial families, is really the emphasis on letting them tell you what they know and trusting that what they know and what they're experiencing is real. Because I think a lot of times as parents, even so, eliminate race, right? My son will come to me and he'll say something, like he hurt himself. And I'll be like, oh, it's not that bad. It's okay. You're fine. Right. And why do I do that? It's not from a malicious standpoint. I do that because I really genuinely want him to be okay. And I want him to be fine. And I want to move past the place that is causing him some distress. A lot of times we do that when children are experiencing and having racial incidences. And when we were doing it out of a place of love, like we want to move them through it. But sometimes, especially if it's not an experience that maybe we have a direct experience with, or that is our own experience, it's important to stop, listen, and believe them.
Excellent.
Right? Give them the opportunity to tell you what their lived experience is, because it may be very different than what you perceive or what you may have experienced in yourself. And that's an opportunity to learn. But most importantly, it's an opportunity for them to be seen and heard.
That is
I think we were very intentional not to call this session How to Teach Kids About Race, because a key element to talking with kids about race, or talking to them about anything, or talking to anyone with anything, is that leaving open the possibility that you could learn, as opposed to just simply teaching. So I think to kind of piggyback on that idea as well is keep in mind that they can teach you plenty of things that you have never thought of, and remaining open to that and proceeding with learning as much as wanting to share and to even heal.
excellent. I think we have time for one more question. We have about a minute left here, but I'm going to just sneak this one in. How can we expand on this further and familiarize our white children with the concept of their privilege?
So I think this is an excellent question. We have some things that are coming along in the pipeline that we hope we'll be able to answer this even more directly. One of the big projects that we've been working on is a project with American Girl, and we don't have a lot of details that we can share now, but one of the things is helping kind of address some of these things and giving more resources. I think that the cards that we have that are coming out also allow for us to do that. I think facilitating those kinds of conversation and really talking, just even defining privilege and letting them understand that, and then being able to say, and where do we see that in our lives? And what does that look like? And where does that show up? And how do we benefit from that? Asking some of those questions and that series of questions allows for them to put a different lens on the way that they're seeing the world. So we have a ton of resources that are coming out. Obviously, you know, our goal is to serve, overserve. So hopefully you'll be able to stay connected with us, and we'll be able to do, you know, provide some of those resources, but we're not the only ones who do it. There are other great places that also provide resources for all different age groups that really allow for you to get at some of these direct topics.
One of them that you can look at is teachingtolerance.org. It has full-on curriculum for teachers, but it can obviously also be used for adults with children in their lives. And then it's separated out according to topic and according to age group and grade as well, which can be a helpful start.
Yeah. And also We Need Diverse Books is a great resource. There's just a lot of great ones out there. So I would say get on the Google,
Yeah.
get on the Google and get busy, right? Pulling in some resources that can help.
This has been a great hour. It's gone so quickly. We could have probably talked for another hour on this. I cannot tell you how many great comments there are in the chat about what you guys have just talked about. I want to remind everybody about the conversation cards. You know, follow us on United Way. We'll have information on our website. We'll have emails going out. This is going to be a really exciting project. Thank you to both of you for presenting today. Any closing comments before we end?
Yeah, actually, I guess the one thing that we would just say is a thank you to all of you. We do a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. We get to talk to people all over the world. Our favorite is when we get to talk to people in our own home, in our own hometown. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to do that. But one of the things that I think is really important to remember is that we've never gone anyplace. And as much as we work, you know, on our talking points and how we're going to do, we've never gone to a place and we've had the like right mix of words and somebody is like, yeah, I changed everything that I believe now. That's not how it happens. How it actually happens is through relationships and conversations with people you care about. That's where we see the most significant change happening. And so what I want to do is just remind you of that. If you're feeling like powerless, if you're feeling like you don't have all the answers, you're feeling like you don't have all the resources, guess what? You do have. You have a sphere of influence. You have children who look up to you. You have children who trust you. You have children where you can set a different course for the way that they interact with race, the way they interact with the world, the way they perceive themselves, and the way they show up for justice. So just want to tell you, like, even in the moments where we feel like, oh, I don't know what I can do, remember these techniques. Remember how much power you have. Remember how much power you have to just reach out to that marginalized group, which is children, to bring them into the center and help them thrive and help them join the fight for racial inequity. And I just want to make sure that we also just give another shout out to Rockwell Automation for their ongoing support and to the United Way for their ongoing support. It has been, and all of you, like this is what gives us energy, right? For being here and doing this work. If there's any way that we can help you, any way we can serve, any other questions that we didn't get to that you have, please feel free to reach out to us. That's our favorite thing, is being able to connect with you. So all of our contact information is up there. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Deanna and Justin.